Most people think that working a grueling, 14-hour day is the absolute secret to extreme wealth. But what if I told you that grinding like that is actually the fastest way to guarantee you never reach the top 1%? Because hard work is actually a trap if you don't have this one specific cognitive trait.
Right. I mean, it's mathematically the most inefficient path to wealth, yet it's the exact trap that the vast majority of people fall into on a daily basis.
If you are obsessed with the why behind human success, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and turn on that bell to join the Insight Lab. We drop deep dives like this every week to help you outsmart the average. Now let's get into the data. So most people think hard work is the answer. It's not. Today, we are breaking down the 1% decision framework and why your own brain might actually be your worst enemy when it comes to success.
Yeah, we really need to establish right up front that extreme success is not about sleep deprivation or grinding yourself into dust. It is a completely different operating system for processing reality.
Right, you don't need to be drinking kale juice at 4 a.m. to be successful.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Most people view their career kind of like a vending machine. You put in 1 hour of labor and you get 1 unit of reward out. It's a strictly linear equation.
Okay, yeah.
But the ultra-wealthy, they view their career like planting an orchard. They might spend an entire year watering dirt with zero immediate return. But eventually, that system they built just drops fruit every single season while they sleep.
And that is exactly the stakes here. If you want to escape the vending machine, you have to understand how they trade their absolute most valuable asset, which is time.
Yes, time is the ultimate currency.
And to really get that, we have to start by completely shattering our baseline understanding of danger and risk. Because, when you picture massive success, your brain naturally conjures up this archetype of the daredevil.
Oh, for sure. The visionary who bets their entire net worth on one insane idea.
Exactly. Risking total ruin for a shot at glory. But the data shows the highly successful are actually, mathematically speaking, terrified of ruin. They're deeply structurally risk-averse.
They despise losing. I mean, they hate it. The difference is that they categorize risk fundamentally differently than the average person does. They absolutely refuse to take symmetrical risks, but they are apex predators when it comes to asymmetrical risks.
Okay, let's unpack that. Symmetrical risk. Let's define that mechanism clearly for everyone listening right now.
Sure. So a symmetrical risk is just your standard everyday trade-off. It's balanced. In career terms, it's working a salary job. Like, I risk 40 hours of my week, and the upside is a predetermined paycheck.
So if things go wrong, the downside is I lose my time. But the upside is I just get my exact wage, nothing more.
Right. Or if you put, say, $10,000 into a standard mutual fund, it might go up a little, it might go down a little. The potential loss and the potential gain are roughly mirrored.
Got it. The capped downside with a heavily capped upside.
Precisely. And asymmetrical math entirely breaks that linearity. The 1% framework, it hunts exclusively for scenarios where the downside is strictly limited, like almost negligible, but the upside is entirely uncapped. It's exponential.
The math is basically, if I lose $10, but if I win, I make 10,000.
Exactly.
But give me a tangible example of what that actually looks like in practice, because I feel like the standard advice here is always, well, go start a massive tech company. And that just isn't helpful for someone navigating a regular Tuesday.
Fair point. So let's look at it in terms of social capital, or what we call permissionless leverage. Think about sending a highly targeted, deeply researched cold email to a CEO or an industry leader you really admire.
Okay.
What is the actual downside of that action? It takes you perhaps 30 minutes to write, and they ignore it. You lose 30 minutes. Your baseline life hasn't changed at all.
Right. You're right back where you started.
But what is the upside? They reply, it leads to a virtual coffee, which then leads to a career-defining mentorship or a job offer or a board seat. The loss is strictly capped at 30 minutes. The win alters the trajectory of your entire life.
Oh, wow. So it's essentially a lottery ticket where you don't pay with cash, you just pay with focused, contained bursts of time. Another great example is writing a piece of open source code for a side project. Like, the worst case scenario is nobody uses it and you got some solid programming practice.
Right. And the best case scenario is it gets adopted by a major platform and suddenly you're recognized as the leading expert in a whole new digital infrastructure.
You're taking a bunch of small steps off a very low curb, knowing that eventually one of those steps is going to launch you into orbit.
They never jump off a cliff. They just take thousands of calculated low curb steps.
Okay, but here is where I hit a wall with this. And I want to push back on behalf of anyone listening who has actually tried this.
Sure, go ahead.
If you are constantly looking for these asymmetrical risks, these, lottery tickets paid for with time, you are inevitably going to encounter a lot of duds. By definition, most low-curve steps do not launch you into orbit.
No, most of them will absolutely fail.
Right, so if I send 50 cold emails and get 0 replies, or I build 3 side projects and they all flop, my immediate human instinct is to cling to those failures because I've invested so much energy into them.
Oh, it's exhausting.
So how does the 1% brain handle that massive accumulation of failure without just entirely drowning in it?
Well, they don't drown because they have completely neutralized the sunk cost fallacy. And to understand how they do this, we really have to look at the evolutionary biology of why the rest of us get trapped by it in the first place.
Wait, biology? How does that factor in?
Because human beings are biologically wired to hoard resources. For our ancient ancestors, wasting energy or food literally meant death. So when we invest time, money, or emotional bandwidth into a project today, our brain still perceives that investment as a vital survival resource.
Wow. So it creates this massive cognitive dissonance. We hate the idea of admitting we burned a vital resource for nothing, so we just double down to justify the original burn.
It's exactly why you see incredibly smart people stay in a soul-crushing job for 6 years. They think, oh, I already suffered through 3 years to get to middle management. I can't just walk away now.
Right, because then those 3 years were a waste.
That is the exact trap. But the 1% framework requires a brutal, almost clinical detachment from the physical reality of the past. The way they process reality, past time is entirely gone. It has evaporated from the universe.
So the time you spent on that failing project yesterday literally no longer exists.
It doesn't, and therefore it mathematically cannot factor into today's equation.
So what does this all mean practically? It's like treating your past effort as expired milk. Just because you paid for it last week doesn't mean you should force yourself to drink it today.
That is a perfect visualization. Or imagine you buy a non-refundable ticket to a 3-hour movie. You sit down in the theater, and after 30 minutes, you realize it is unequivocally the worst film you've ever seen.
I've been there. The average person definitely stays in the theater. They think, hey, I paid $15 for this ticket. I have to get my money's worth.
Right. But watching a terrible movie for 2 more hours doesn't refund your $15. It just actively steals 2 more hours of your life.
That makes so much sense. So the ultra-wealthy just stand up and walk out of the theater at minute 31.
Without a second thought. They apply that exact same lack of hesitation to a failing business venture, a bad partnership, or an inefficient software build. The only question that matters to them, the singular filter through which they view their current reality, is this. Is the next hour the best possible use of my resources?
Is the next hour the best use of my resources? It's strictly forward-looking. I imagine that for you, listening right now, fully internalizing that concept offers a tremendous amount of psychological relief.
It is the ultimate cognitive unburdening. Think about the heavy, paralyzing guilt most people carry when they abandon a project. I'm a quitter, I failed, I wasted a year of my life.
Yeah, that guilt is awful.
The 1% framework eliminates that guilt entirely. Letting go of a failing project isn't a failure. It is an immediate, highly efficient reallocation of capital. You stop mourning the movie ticket, you walk out of the dark theater, and you go find a fresh asymmetrical risk.
But that raises the next major hurdle in this framework. If past effort is completely irrelevant, and the only thing that matters is how you spend the next hour, you need a highly calibrated instrument to evaluate what that next hour is actually worth.
Because if you evaluate it poorly, you just walk right into another terrible movie theater.
Exactly.
And this brings us to the core processing engine of the whole framework, second-order thinking. If you want to evaluate the true compounding value of your next hour, you have to look far beyond the immediate outcomes. You have to anticipate the cascading domino effect of your actions.
We can call this the and then what's filter. Because most of us operate heavily on first-order thinking, which is just linear cause and effect. If I do X, Y happens.
Right, like I'm hungry, I eat a donut, I feel good, that's first order.
And second-order thinking is recognizing that eating the donut every day leads to a spike in blood sugar, severe lethargy in the afternoon, and long-term health decline.
Exactly. The first-order consequence is positive, but the second and third-order consequences are disastrous.
Let's apply this to business and time management. A classic first-order decision is looking at an expensive piece of software and saying, well, if I buy this, I lose $5,000. That's a bad outcome. End of calculation.
The immediate effect is just a lower bank balance.
Right.
But the And then what filter forces the brain to trace the ripple effect? So
Right.
you spend the $5,000, and then what? The software sets up a programmatic API trigger that automates all of your client onboarding, which saves your core team 20 hours a week.
And then what?
Those 20 hours of freed up human capital are aggressively redirected into outbound sales, allowing the team to acquire 2 new enterprise clients.
And then what? Those 2 clients increase your company's overall valuation by $1 million?
Precisely. So $1 million increase in valuation, all triggered by a single purchase, that first order thinking would have instinctively rejected as simply too expensive.
This is why you often see highly successful people make moves that seem completely irrational or weird in the short term. They aren't looking at the immediate price tag. They're looking at the overall architecture of the system.
Yeah. First order thinking is focused on surviving the present moment. Second order thinking is about architecting the future.
Here is where I really need to push back, though. Because for you, the listener, navigating a hyper-busy week, consciously calculating fourth-order consequences for every single decision, sounds like a fast track to severe decision fatigue.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if I try to apply the and then what's filter to every email I send or every meeting I schedule, my brain will completely short circuit before lunch. How does a human brain actually train itself to calculate these probabilities on the fly without becoming paralyzed by overthinking?
It's a critical distinction, and you're absolutely right. The ultra-successful are not manually calculating fourth-order consequences for what they're having for lunch.
Okay, good.
They avoid decision fatigue by isolating this cognitive heavy lifting exclusively to highly consequential, resource-heavy decisions.
So they aren't using it on reversible, low-stakes choices at all?
Never. You only deploy this filter when a decision involves a significant investment of capital or, more importantly, a significant investment of your time, like hiring a key team member or launching a new product line.
Got it.
And the mechanism of building this habit is actually rooted in neuroplasticity. By forcing yourself to sit down and physically map out the second and third order effects of your big projects, literally writing them out on paper, you actively build new neural pathways.
So over time, your intuition just adapts.
Yeah. You begin to instinctively recoil from actions that have bad second-order consequences, even if the first-order result looks shiny. It transitions from a draining manual calculation to an automatic reflex.
That makes total sense. You build the muscle on the heavy lift, so eventually your brain just naturally sees the whole board. And that leads us to the absolute pinnacle of this framework.
The master principle.
Right. Because seeing these ripple effects, ruthlessly abandoning sunk costs, taking asymmetrical risks, all of these behaviors are meticulously designed to protect and multiply one specific thing: time.
Time is the ultimate non-renewable asset. And the starkest contrast in the entire framework lies right here. Average operators trade time for money. The top 1% use money to buy time.
They treat their attention, their actual cognitive focus, exactly like a finite bank account that must be audited with extreme prejudice.
The math they use is entirely uncompromising. If you have determined that your ultimate goal is to earn, say, $5,000 an hour, or you value your strategic thinking at that level, then executing a task that you could pay someone else $50 an hour to do is not just inefficient.
It's actively harmful.
Under this framework, it is an egregious violation of your own potential. You are actively robbing yourself of your ultimate asset.
Which is such a massive psychological hurdle. We are conditioned from a very young age to be completely self-reliant. We have this deep-seated belief that, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
But doing a $50 administrative task when your brain needs to be solving a $5,000 strategic problem is a total failure of the system.
And the way you bridge that gap, the actual mechanism you use to execute this in the real world, is leverage.
Leverage is the fulcrum that allows you to lift disproportionate weight. But the definition of leverage has completely transformed over the last decade. Historically, leverage was almost exclusively permissioned.
Meaning you needed someone's approval or capital to get it.
Right. It meant convincing a bank to give you a massive loan or hiring a sprawling staff of human employees. You needed capital and labor.
But in 2026, the highest form of leverage is now entirely permissionless. It is code, it is AI, and it is media.
Software, artificial intelligence, and digital media offer infinite scale with a marginal cost of replication that sits virtually at zero. When you build a piece of software or engineer a complex AI workflow or record a piece of foundational media, you do the work exactly once.
How can I do this once and have it work for me 1,000 times? That is the absolute core mindset shift. You are moving from the mentality of operating a job to engineering a system.
And a job is that symmetrical trade we talked about earlier. 1 hour of work for 1 hour of pay.
While a system is an asymmetrical trade, 1 hour of building code or setting up programmatic API triggers, and it executes that task 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, forever, without you ever lifting another finger.
But this requires a very uncomfortable audit of your daily life. A typical to-do list, the kind most people write out on a Sunday night, is almost entirely populated by first-order, low-leverage tasks. It's just a list of manual symmetrical trades.
I have to admit, looking at my own schedule for tomorrow through this lens makes me want to burn half of it. It is painfully obvious how many low-leverage first-order tasks I just accept as work. Manually updating CRM pipelines, drafting routine responses, it's the digital equivalent of digging a ditch with a spoon.
It really is.
So for the listener who is having that exact same realization right now, who wants to stop digging with a spoon tomorrow morning, we need a concrete framework. How do they practically identify and eliminate these low-leverage tasks?
We can distill this down to a 3-step mental check you can run tomorrow morning. Let's call it the Insight Lab protocol.
I like that.
Step 1 is the asymmetrical audit. Look at your top 3 priorities for the week. Are any of them asymmetrical? Do any of them have a capped downside but an exponential upside? If not, you are playing it entirely too safe.
So what should they do?
Carve out exactly 1 hour tomorrow to initiate a high upside action like sending that strategic cold email or writing a piece of public analysis.
Awesome. Step 2, the expired milk purge. Or, sticking to our movie theater analogy, walking out of the bad movie. Identify one project, subscription, or recurring weekly meeting that you are only maintaining because you feel like you already put in the time to start it. Sever it completely. Reclaim that hour.
And step 3 is the systemization question. For every remaining task on your list tomorrow, ask yourself, does completing this task make it easier to complete the next time?
If you are manually pulling data for a weekly report from scratch every single Friday, the answer is no.
That is deeply low leverage. Spend 3 hours this week figuring out the AI automation or the API script so you never have to pull it manually again. You do the hard work once and it works 1,000 times.
You do not need $1 billion in your bank account today to start acting on this. You just need to stop making 99% decisions. You now have the framework. You know how to audit your time, neutralize your sunk costs, and build permissionless leverage.
And as you evaluate those decisions and start building those systems, I want to leave you with one final thought to consider. We discussed how modern leverage is defined by code, AI, and media. The wealthy use these tools to buy back their time and scale their impact infinitely. But we are rapidly approaching a horizon where these tools are entirely ubiquitous. What happens when the underlying code and the hyper-advanced AI are available to the 99% just as easily as the 1%?
If the tech levels the playing field entirely, what becomes the new leverage?
Exactly. Will the definition of asymmetrical advantage shift away from technology entirely? Will the ultimate premium move back to pure, irreplaceable human connection, deep empathy, and the ability to forge analog trust in a purely digital world? Something for you to chew on as you evaluate your next move.
If you realized your to-do list is a trap, you're only halfway there, because the way you recharge actually determines if you can use this cognitive framework at all. Watch our breakdown on the billionaire sleep myth right here to complete the puzzle. Have a phenomenal week ahead.